Hey everyone, we're back again with another story, and this one is a very long one, so be sure to stick around till the end. And it's titled, How My Marriage Ended. Please be sure to like the video and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Let's get right into it. This happened many years ago, so if it's not allowed on this sub, I understand. I just need a place to write it out, having never really told the full story before. If allowed, it may come in many parts to keep the length from being overwhelming. This will be the part 1 because this is the first time she cheated, and it's kind of a long story. I was married for 10 years the first time. I got married young, and was very happy to do so. About a year in, my wife dropped any facade she had, and went full-blown into the eating disorder she'd been nursing her whole life. Knowing what I know now, there were huge signs of it that I didn't see. She spent 9 years yo-yoing her weight. She'd get up to 130 pounds, then down to 90 pounds, up to 150 pounds, down to 80 pounds. This went on for 6 years of our marriage before. At year 6, she began to be hospitalized every other month to be stabilized so she wouldn't pass away. She finally got to a point where around year 8, she was so sick from malnutrition and down to 75 pounds that she was hospitalized again, and we were finally able to get her into rehab for eating disorders. She spent several months there. On top of all that, I was working full-time, and we were both going to school full-time. Throughout all of this, I was doting and supportive husband. We were married after all, and that was through sickness and health, until death do us apart. Apparently, that was only a one-way street. I did not cope well with this. We had always gotten drunk together, smoked, and took pills. All of that was done recreationally. However, around year 7, I hurt my back and got some painkillers, and I began taking them every day. They became my way to cope. While she was in her rehab, I was coping with pills to help me sleep from the loneliness, stress, and pain of it all. When she returned, she wasn't the same person. She would sleep from 9 p.m. until 1 p.m., wake up for the afternoon and evening, then go back to bed at 9 every day. She was severely depressed, and the stress was getting to me. From the time she got home in September of year 8 until May of year 9, this was her schedule. In May, the stress of work, school, and this hell of a life finally destroyed me, and I broke. And I told her I had a problem, and I went to rehab. I had to start doing my own therapy and going to my own doctor's appointments. I'm happy to say that I have been clean since then, although I still drank for almost a year after I got clean from the pills. The thing is, I had neglected myself for 9 years while tending to her, and she didn't like it at all that I had to start focusing on myself at least a little bit. She began to get angry for me having to go to counseling, or the doctor, or any meeting I attended. Eventually, we decided that we needed to move to get away from both of our major triggers, my dealers and her mom. A year after she got out of rehab in September, we moved to my hometown. When we got there, we were having issues, but we were still working towards our mutual goals. We both got jobs easily enough, and she tried to say I didn't need to find any help with my issues because we were away from my triggers. But she still needed to get help. It became a fight. Then December happened. It started small. First, she told me that her manager at work kept complimenting her on how pretty she was. He told her he liked that she didn't have to wear makeup, and that she was naturally pretty, unlike his wife who had to cake it on like a clown. This went on for a few weeks. Then, one night, she was getting off work and getting ready to walk to the gym when he saw her as he was leaving and offered her a ride. She accepted. When he got to the gym, they talked for a minute. Then he asked for a hug, which she said yes to. After the hug, he kissed her. According to her, she automatically pulled away. He apologized and she got out. She told me about it as soon as she got home. I had no reason to be mad at her for this because based on her story, she did nothing wrong. Sure, it shows a lack of judgment by accepting a hug from your boss who's always complimenting you on your beauty, but I believed her when she said she didn't invite the kiss. The thing is, she said she did feel an adrenaline rush when he kissed her. I should have seen that for the red flag that it was, but I didn't. That had happened in the beginning of December, and for the rest of the month, she would politely refuse rides from him. I didn't even need to insist. She told me she was going to do so, and then did. As far as I could see, there was no reason not to trust her. Boy, was I wrong. The whole time this was happening, one of my best friends, Jay, who I hadn't seen for 5 to 6 years, had begun making plans to come to town for Christmas. He had spent the intervening time in a very controlling relationship, and wasn't allowed to see friends not approved by his ex. They had broken up and he had gotten custody of their daughter. He wanted her to meet his family because that is what we are. When I say he was one of my best friends, I am not exaggerating. He and a couple of other people are my siblings. They aren't friends. They are my brothers and sisters, and I am closer to them than I am to my own blood family. I called two of their parents' moms. The fact I hadn't seen Jay in so long had broken my heart, especially since I had gone to where he lived to see him and he didn't come to see me because of his ex. I was ecstatic to see him. The plans were made. On Christmas Eve, I was to drive 2 hours to get him from the town his sister dropped him off in, then would drive back home. Joe had to work, so it would just be Jay and I catching up and riding with his daughter. So that's what we did. We talked to his daughter and played card games with her until she slept, which didn't take it long as it was late and had been in a car for several hours. We spent the next 2 hours talking about life and love and pain and heartbreak. He told me about his relationship with his ex. I told him about the problems I was having with Joe. I even told him about the scummy manager. It was like old times, except now I had a niece to share life with. In the middle of it, I get a text from my mom asking why Joe was crying. I had no idea, and asked how she knew that. My mom's friend worked with Joe and saw her run into the bathroom crying. I had an idea of why, but wasn't sure. But I told Jay what was going on and what I thought. We commiserated until we got home. When we got there, we went to pick up Joe from the gym where she'd gone after work. She exercised 2 hours every day, usually running 12 miles a day, and my fear was confirmed. She'd been let go from her job. It was sad, but we moved on. Jay and his daughter had been staying with another friend of ours as Joe and I lived with my parents at the time. We saw them when we could and enjoyed getting to know his daughter. We enjoyed Christmas with Jay's host's family and moved into New Year's. The night before New Year's Eve, one of my other friends had a party, but the party was a bring your whole family, put the kids to bed, and have adult time party. Some of us got really drunk. This includes Joe, Jay, and I. During the party, things were really weird. I thought I kept hearing Joe make weird comments, but was pretty drunk. I didn't trust my perception on this. At one point, I had to go to the bathroom. I felt like something was holding the door closed. I pushed on it, it gave. But as I tried to walk in, Joe comes out from behind the door and tries to get me to go somewhere with her. I told her I had to pee, went in and shut the door. That's when I see Jay behind the door. I drunkenly say, "Hi, Jay, what's up?" as I go to pee, and he just says, "You really need to talk to your wife," and walks out of the bathroom. When I was done, I asked her what that was all about, and she said she was asking him for advice on our marriage. It irked me, but I was too drunk to care or think logically about it. All three of us went to sleep in the living room of the party house that night after the party. The next morning, I woke up pretty early, and I was hungover badly. I woke up Joe and told her I needed to go home to sleep in a real bed and asked if she was coming. She said she just wanted to sleep and was staying. Still not thinking right. I said okay and walked a few blocks to my parents' house. I went back to sleep immediately. I was woken up a few hours later by Joe, Jay, and his daughter coming into the room and jumping on me. For the next few hours, we sat in my room watching movies and TV shows and just generally having a good time. I did catch a few weird things happening between the two of them though. At one point, I thought I saw Jay put his hand high up on the inside of her thigh out of the corner of my eye, but when I looked, he had moved it off her completely. I didn't know if I was imagining it or not. I was getting suspicious of them, especially after finally thinking about the bathroom incident, but nothing concrete. Then my mom asked me to go to the store for her. I asked if they wanted to go, but they both said no. My niece on the other hand said yes, so I thought, hey, some uncle/niece bonding time, and took her with me. Plus, I also thought that I'd see if I could catch them in the act. The girl and I went to Walmart and got what my mom wanted, and I bought the girl a gift. We went back to the house and we went inside. When we pulled up, I could see them in the window moving really quickly, but by the time I could look, nothing was amiss. I sat there stewing for a couple of hours and I hatched my plan. Somehow, I can't remember exactly. I think I said I forgot/wanted something. I let them know I needed to leave again and telling them I'd be back. Since it was later in the evening, by this point, his daughter was asleep, so I didn't need to take her, nor would I have if she wasn't. Where we lived, my bedroom window looked out onto the driveway so they'd always know when I came back. I'd never be able to catch them doing anything if they could see me every time I came home. I had to sneak up on them. When I left, I drove a small bit away like I was leaving, but instead pulled over a couple of blocks away and walked back. I went back to the house, and because you could hear the front fence from my room whether the window was shut or not, I went to the back gate and went into the yard. I walked to the front and stood in the shadows outside my bedroom window seeing if I could see anything. Oh, I definitely did. They looked like they were wrestling, and although they were fully clothed, you could tell it wasn't just playing. I watched for a few seconds to make sure I really didn't misunderstand the situation, but he put his hands up her thighs and onto her crotch and then kissed her deeply. They were doing this on the floor as to not disturb the kid on the bed sleeping. I was pissed. I walked into the house and to my bedroom. I opened my door to their shocked surprise. They pushed off each other and tried to say they were just playing around and fell off the bed, when I said I saw everything from the window including the kiss. I stepped over them both, grabbed the money from our little safe, resisted the urge to kick them in their grave faces as they wouldn't shut up about how sorry they were, said a few choice words, and walked out. They tried to come after me, but because I had parked to come in the back gate, they didn't know that. They went out the front to look for me. That night, I got a hotel room. Joe kept blowing up my phone, and I finally answered and told her to quit calling. I wasn't coming home. They apparently stayed at my parents' house, which after finding out what happened, my parents were not happy with, while I lapped in luxury at my hotel, crying my eyes out and raging to myself. The next day, I texted the host of the party, LL, to let her know what had happened. She commiserated with me and said Jay was supposed to be coming over later and we'd talk later. Joe called me again and told me that she was sorry for the umpteenth time. I was having none of it. Sometime in here, she told me that she had gotten a ride from her boss the night he fired her, and he had kissed her again, and that she had liked the adrenaline rush. She said she liked it and went looking for it again, but now didn't like the outcome. I told her to leave me alone for a while and we'd talk. Later that night, I went to LL's house to talk, but on the way there, Joe and Jay saw me as they were walking to the gym. Can't let your marriage falling apart stop you from gym time, people, and tried to get me to stop. I rolled down my window and told them to leave me alone, but they kept standing in front of the truck to get me to stop. When I would, they'd walk to get me to roll down the window and I'd go trying again, rinse and repeat. I rolled down my window again and told them to let me go. I wasn't in the mood to talk and I was getting madder than I already was. Jay just stood in front of my truck, so I got out. I yelled at him for a minute before he went to give me a hug and apologize. I snapped. I shot in for a double leg and somewhere in the melee of our scramble, I ended up on his back. I sunk in a sleeper hold and pushed his face into the snow. Joe is screaming for me to stop while I'm trying to choke the life out of this guy who used to be my brother before she finally started trying to pull me off of him. I told him to leave me alone, let go, got back in the truck and left. I went to Ella's house and told her what happened. That was the last time I saw Jay before he left. On New Year's Day, I talked to Joe. I couldn't stay in the hotel very long due to money, and she had nowhere to go but back home to her mom. Neither of us wanted to give up the marriage, or so we thought, but started to reconcile. In that reconciliation, she told me everything that had happened. After I left to go home, LL and her husband went out for breakfast with their kid and asked Jay if they could take her daughter. He said yes, and that left Joe and Jay alone together. They had intercourse, but according to both of them, I talked to Jay a few months later, but that's a part for another story. It wasn't much of a good time. He literally one pump chumped her. She said the intercourse wasn't the good part. It was the adrenaline she got from that new and exciting feeling. She said that after her boss kissed her the second time, she started craving that rush. They had intercourse on LL's couch. This was not long before Jay left, and I told LL what happened. She was pissed and hasn't talked to Jay since. Eventually, Jay left, and we began to work on our marriage to see if we could fix the broken parts. She was still insistent that I don't get therapy. Too bad for her. I was already in. We hadn't had intercourse for a couple of months before she cheated, and that never happened again. Less than 2 weeks after she cheated, she made plans to go back and see her mom. She left the day before my birthday despite me begging her to wait. She wouldn't. As we are driving to the airport, our drive to get there, she gets a text message that I look at. Before that text, we never hid our phones from each other. If I got a text, she'd read it and hand it to me. I'd do the same. I did so this time and she got angry. The contents were probably the reason. Turns out, she had reconnected with an old boyfriend from high school. That text message, maybe I should bring my vibrators. When I rightfully asked what the F that was all about, it devolved into a fight about me looking at her texts despite this never having been a problem before. We spent the last bit before we get to the airport fighting. When we get there, we angrily say goodbyes and I love yous and she leaves. She spent the whole trip cheating on me with said ex-boyfriend. She tried to keep it a secret by saying they were just hanging out, but when they are just hanging out and she won't text me for 4 hours, it's kinda telling. Why I let her come back, I'll never know. Probably because of the phone call. Not long before her trip is supposed to end, almost a month later, she calls me crying. She has happy news, she says. She's pregnant. At the time, I hadn't put together that I couldn't possibly be the father, so I let her come home and we resolved to put everything behind us to raise the baby. We went to the first checkup and that's when I discovered there was no way I was the dad. Time-wise, it wasn't possible. I was not happy with this development and let him know he was going to be a dad again. He didn't believe me. It was a moot point anyway. Less than a month later, she lost the baby at about 10 weeks. This is when the marriage really went downhill. By the end of March, we're done, and I was alone. She was back home with her mom, and I was drinking quite heavily. How we got there is another story entirely. Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you like the video and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, and be sure to comment below what other subreddits you want me to cover.